Vignette number 37 from Zen is right here. Teaching Stories and Anecdotes of Shunryu Suzuki. Suzuki Roshi, I've been listening to your lectures for years, a student said during the question and answer time following a lecture. But I just don't understand. Could you please put it in a nutshell? Can you reduce Buddhism to one phrase? Everyone laughed. Suzuki laughed. Everything changes, he said. Then he asked for another question. I said that. I was that student. But I had forgotten it. Bill Shurtleff told me that when I interviewed him long ago, mid to late 1990s. That is in the introduction to Crooked Cucumber. In the introduction, as I recall, it says, everyone laughed, Suzuki laughed. We didn't expect him necessarily to answer in a nutshell, but he did. Everything changes. And Bill Shurtleff also pointed out in his interview that Henry Ford had that emblazoned on the something like the entrance to his Ford plant. Something like, of all things, only one is certain, that everything changes. So it's a perennial philosophy. Because everything changes, and because we want things to be permanent, there is suffering. Because we don't want to lose what we have, what we love, there is suffering. But also suffering is because we have what we don't want, such as pain or loss. In that case, we want things to change quicker. I almost always have all of Shunryu Suzuki's lectures in one file open because, I post an excerpt from it 6 days a week on What's New blog, and I frequently have to refer to it. I searched for everything changes, and the phrase in his extant lectures, the ones we have there, has that phrase repeated 73 times. Here, I'll read you the first one. Here I see it 1, 2, 3, 3 times in this paragraph. In the next paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The basic teaching of Buddhism is the teaching of transiency, or change. Everything changes is the basic teaching. And this truth is eternal truth for existence, and no one can deny this truth. And all the teaching of Buddhism will be condensed in this teaching. This is the teaching for all of us. And wherever we go, this teaching is true. This teaching is also interpreted as the teaching of selflessness, because our self-nature of each existence is nothing but the self-nature of all existence. There is no special self-nature for each existence. And this teaching is also called the teaching of nirvana. When we realize this truth and when we resume, when we find our composure in the everlasting truth, which is everything changes, we find ourselves in nirvana. Or if we cannot accept this teaching that everything changes, we cannot be in composure, perfect composure. I was going to sign out at that point, but then I noticed a mistake in what I read. It didn't say the basic teaching of Buddhism is the teaching of transiency or change. It said the basic teaching of Buddhism is the teaching of transcendence or change. And I read it that way. And then, when I was going over I go over the audio and fix a few things, like when I clear my throat, which I thought I had done in vignette number 36 before I posted it. I didn't. So I got a thanks to John Nozin leaving me a message on YouTube. I redid it. Good Lord, terrible. I was clearing my throat several times. I had fixed the end of it because it got sort of complicated. And there was somebody waiting for me to leave and do some shopping, and Katrinka's just back from America. And I was sort of in a hurry to get that up because it was time to put it up. And so, well, that's what happens when I get in a hurry. So I fixed that. But anyway, so it said the basic teaching of Buddhism is the teaching of transcendence or change. And I went, whoa, no, that's not what he would have said. He would have said transiency or change. And I thought, I must not have read it right. And I went back and looked, no, it said that. And I thought, that's not right. That's a transcriber's error, pretty obviously, because look, in Zen Mind Beginner's Mind, it has it right. Incidentally, you'll see how close Zen Mind Beginner's Mind is to these early, these first draft transcripts. This is either from Marion Derby or the one they did for Zen Mind Beginner's Mind. There were two sets, and only one of them remains, and was I just barely found it in a box buried in the Zen Center library. 60 lectures in there. We had no transcript for most of them. We didn't have the original lectures. We didn't have the tapes. For Zen Mind Beginner's Mind, the tapes are all lost except for 2. But when I found that, I went. It was in the Zen Center storage in the reading room, and I found that in the afternoon, and I went into the photocopy room and photocopied until all night long, until when I got out, people were getting out of Zazen. I was in there. I didn't stop. I just kept going. There were three versions. There was the original one, middle version, where it was more edited, and then even a more edited. And I just keep the original one online. Anyway, I sent those to GM, and she put them all on disk so I could enter them into online. And originally, that was before I had ShunyuSuzuki.com. They were on Quk.com. Then they went on ShunyuSuzuki.com. So in the old days, that's how things were copied. They were just recopied down. And of course, mistakes would be made in the recopying. And I used to study Chinese characters, and there was this whole theory of each character represented a picture people would have, a theory that came from the West, a picture that people would have, and they thought in terms of these pictures and not in terms of symbolic thought the way we do. But most of the characters didn't stand for what they originally had stood. I mean, so many of them were not like river, which looks like a river, or tree, which looks like a tree. And what I read was the most important factor in the development of Chinese characters through the years was mistakes in transcribing through, millennia. And so, I went back and looked on ShunyuSuzuki.com and made sure it said transcendence there everywhere. Only in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, does it say transiency. So then I sent a note and wrote a little explanatory note to Peter Ford, who works with me on the archive, and I said, here's the change that we should make. And when we make that change, and I went back and looked at the original verbatim that was done by Bill Redican and his team around the turn of the century. And they didn't have a tape to work with, so they were just entering from a transcript too. Anyway, they had transcendence. So everywhere it was transcendence, except in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. So it got changed. So that's before GM. So that's an old mistake. It's clearly a mistake. That gives you an example. People say, well, what are you doing? I say, oh, well, doing this and that. And then I'll say, and there's a few of us working on the Suzuki lecture archive, fixing things up and making, some corrections. They said, well, wasn't that all done long ago? And people just can't understand that an archive like this is an ongoing, living thing. No, it's constant. We're making corrections and changes all the time. We mark them. And there's one thing I hadn't thought of, and that is that Suzuki might actually have said transcendence there. And then in making Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, Trudy Dixon or Richard Baker asked him, did you mean to say transcendence or did you mean to say transiency? And he went, oh, whoops, transiency. Because, he'd say the wrong words. I say the wrong words all the time, especially as I get older. Good Lord. Anyway, that was a great paragraph. And it was interesting. I found that mistake. Let's look at it again. The basic teaching of Buddhism is the teaching of transience or change. Everything changes is the basic teaching, and this truth is eternal truth for each existence, and no one can deny this truth. And all the teaching of Buddhism will be condensed in this teaching. This is the teaching for all of us, and wherever we go, this teaching is true. This teaching is also interpreted as the teaching of selflessness, because our self-nature of each existence is nothing but the self-nature of all existence. There is no special self-nature for each existence. And this teaching is also called the teaching of nirvana. When we realize this truth, and when we resume, when we find our composure in the everlasting truth, which is everything changes, we find ourselves in nirvana. Or if we cannot accept this teaching that everything changes, we cannot be in composure, perfect composure. Oh, I'll tell you what lecture that comes from. Oh, that was transiency. Oh, that's got a name. Yeah, that was a lecture given in Los Altos on Thursday morning, September 16th, 1965. Yeah, that was in, that chapter was in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. This is the, this transcript. It can be found in the Shunryu Suzuki lecture archive by searching for 65-09-16. If you go to shunryusuzuki.com, go to the lecture search form and just write 65-09-16 in the search box and hit enter, and it'll go to that lecture. And I was reading from the earliest transcription, the most original transcription. This has been a Cuke Audio mini podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Doggett Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. Wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.